Today I've broken down my prepared comments into 3 different sections. So first I'm going to lead off with sharing with you some background about the social media landscape. And then I'll transition into talking about the value of planning your social media outreach as well as all communication outreach that you do. And then I'll end by sharing 12 tips that you can consider as you're putting into practice a communications plan that has social media components. So to start off with, I just wanted to provide some background about the social media landscape in general. And if you think about it, social media has changed a ton in a relatively short period of time. The first social network launched in 1997. It was called 6degrees.com. There's a good chance you don't remember 6degrees.com or likely never used 6degrees.com. But it did initiate this flurry of activity among developers because developers wanted to create new tools that we could use to connect with each other as well as to create content and then share that content with each other. So what we did see were several other social networks pop up, but it wasn't really until about 2004 that adoption started to gain steam. At that point, Facebook was becoming more widely available. Mark Zuckerberg created the platform in 2003. At that point, it was restricted to his Harvard University classmates, but by 2004, it was becoming more widely available, and it's kind of like the rest is history. It seems like everybody almost has a Facebook page or had a Facebook page at some point. And so you can see that the Facebook platform really did initiate more flurry of activity in developing. And you can see that a lot of the icons up on the screen, which represent different tools that we have available to us to create content and share content, a lot of these are social media platforms that you probably recognize. We have Pinterest, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Snapchat, Tumblr, TikTok, Reddit, and so forth. So we've seen this proliferation of social media channels available to us. The second trend that I want to highlight is that not only do we have more platforms available to use, but we in the US are willing to trial and experiment with several different platforms. The data that you see up on the screen were pulled from the Pew Research Center, which does a periodic survey about every 2 years or so to get a sense of who's using social media. And the data that you see here are the percentage of US adults who say that they've used social media platforms at some point in time. So YouTube and Facebook were the leaders. About 81% of US adults said that they've used YouTube at some point. It was 69% for Facebook. But several channels had at least 25% of the US population saying they've used these platforms at some point. So we are willing to make investments in our time on spending time on these various platforms. So that brings me to the next trend, is that we do spend a fair amount of time on these platforms. The data here on the screen are from eMarketer. What eMarketer is trying to communicate here is the average minutes spent per day for 5 different platforms among average monthly users. So these are users who go to these platforms at least once a month. So you can see that Facebook is the only platform where we see a downtick in the time spent per day. It was about 39 minutes in 2017, and it's dropped down to about 33 minutes in 2022. So it's a drop of about 6 minutes, which isn't really that much. We're still spending, or average monthly users are still spending half an hour a day on Facebook. For the other 4 platforms that are here, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and Twitter, we see an uptick in activity in terms of time spent per day. You can see that that uptick was really noticeable between 2019 and 2020. That's probably due to the coronavirus pandemic. People, or a segment of the population at least, had more time to spend on social media. But see how that trend is largely maintained. We've seen very little drop-off. So people are still spending more time now on these social platforms than they did before the pandemic. So you're probably like, well, interesting statistics, but what does this mean for me? So you can make social media a good tool to use to brand either yourself, investing in personal branding, your business that you may own or operate, or an organization that you represent. So for the rest of today, I'm hoping to give you some tips that you can put into practice to help make social media a part of your communications plan. So my first big overarching tip is the importance of planning your communications efforts. When I say planning, what I mean by this is that with your social media outreach and any other communications that you do, you really benefit if you have a goal orientation. So before you start any work on social media, traditional media, even advertising on any of those channels, it helps to know what it is that you want to achieve. So sit down, think through, what kind of business goals do you have and where can communications plug in? That's really helpful. I oftentimes see that people take more of a tactical approach. I've worked with small businesses and organizations and people who are interested in personal branding, and they come to me and they say something like, I want a video, or I want a website, or I want a Facebook page. That's very tactical thinking. When we ask those questions or pose those questions, I'm still unclear about what we're trying to do with that video or that website or that Facebook page or Twitter account or whatever the case may be. So by having a goal orientation and knowing what you want to achieve, that can inform all the other work that you do in your communications plan. So I'd always encourage you to start with a good goal. After you set the goal, then you can think about what strategies you might want to add to your plan, which strategies are the concepts that you can implement to help you achieve your goal. And then tactics are where we start thinking about the activities, deliverables, channels that you're going to use to communicate and so forth. So I'll give you an example of how this might work. Let's say that you're raising pork, you're wanting to process the animals, and then you want to sell them at your retail storefront and packaged meat. A goal that you might set is that you want to increase your sales at your retail storefront by 10% in the next year. That goal is a strong one because we have a time element and it's also quantifiable, so we can easily track how well we're doing over time on meeting that goal. Strategies could be endless. We can think of a couple. Product education might be an example. You might want to educate people on how to use your products, because if they don't understand how to use them, then they're probably not going to buy them. Another potential strategy could be you wanting to position your retail storefront as the place to go for buying meat. So people will go there instead of just picking up meat whenever they're at the grocery store. Those are two strategies that are very closely linked to wanting to drive sales for your retail storefront by 10% in the next year. The tactical stage is what comes next. So what particular campaigns are we going to run, or what channels are we going to use? And this is where social media can play a part. So social media can be used for a lot of different purposes. You can promote products. You can create more of a two-way communication to where you're collecting information from your existing customers. You can collect new product ideas from either people who are buying from you or even people who just have a general interest in your business and haven't been converted into buyers yet. You can develop loyalty among your existing customers. You can build awareness among consumers who haven't yet purchased from you. And you can also just more generally share information about you, your products, your operation, and so forth. I do want to just briefly highlight the value of a follow on social media. The data that you see up on the screen here I pulled from Sprout Social, and what these are suggesting is that someone who follows you on social media is essentially creating a relationship with you that you want to cultivate over time. And that follow can lead to some real business results. So you can just see that some of the activities that are typical of someone who has followed a brand on social media include things like recommending that brand or that product to friends and family, buying from the brand, visiting the brand's retail store. So I just want to emphasize that when you are developing a following on social media, think of it more as a long-term relationship, because you do want to connect, share information, but you can also derive some real business benefits from that one follow. So that leads me to the last portion of my prepared comments today, and I have 12 different tips for you to keep in mind as you are implementing a communications plan that includes social media elements. And the first is to think about what each platform is good at and who that platform tends to reach. So when you think about the platform's strengths, you want to identify platforms that align with your level of expertise and your interest areas. So let's take YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram as examples. YouTube consumers or users tend to like to see content that has a demonstration component. You're showing them how to do something. They are interested in entertaining content, humorous content, content that has music in it. If your video content can fit into one of those 4 buckets, then you're increasing the chances that consumers are actually going to accept your message on YouTube. If you think about Facebook, Facebook's really prided itself on creating community. So anytime you can talk about people, that's a benefit. I always say that the Facebook pages that I've managed, it's clear that people want to hear about other people. So if you can integrate that human perspective into your messaging, that's beneficial on Facebook. It's beneficial on a lot of channels, but in particular, it seems like Facebook. And then Instagram, one thing that Instagram is really good at is that visual element. So if you're willing to invest in high quality photos or videography, that can be a real benefit on Instagram and allow you to compete well with other content on that platform. And what I mean by knowing each platform's reach, it's helpful to know the audience that a platform tends to reach and your target audience, because you want to give yourself the greatest opportunity to reach the greatest number of your target audience members. So try to choose platforms that your target audience is already using. And luckily, we do have some good data from the Pew Research Center. And what these data are doing, or they're breaking down who tends to use certain social media platforms by demographic characteristic. So we do see that there are some differences. By gender, for example, we see that women are more likely than men to use platforms like Facebook and Pinterest. Men have been more likely than women to use platforms like Reddit. So depending upon who you've targeted as your audience, you can then choose the platforms where that audience is most likely to be sharing content online. Same thing with age. We see some differences in age and social media use. For the most part, younger consumers have been more willing to adopt social platforms than older consumers. We're beginning to notice a change, however, particularly on platforms that are maturing. What I mean by that is the longer they're around, the less likely younger individuals want to be on those platforms. So we're seeing that on Facebook already. You can see that according to this Pew Research Center, which was conducted about this time last year, 70% of 18 to 29-year-olds said that they used Facebook at some point. It was a slightly higher share among the 30 to 64-year-olds. So this is a data point to watch, in other words. See how social media usage changes according to age, and then obviously know who your target audience is so you can be in the platforms where your target audience is spending its time. It's also helpful to think about where consumers actually want to hear messages from brands. They don't necessarily want to be sold to on every platform. So the 3 leaders in the Sprout Social data set, and what I mean by leaders are the platforms where consumers want brands to be messaging to them. Those were Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So that's good food for thought when you're also choosing social platforms that might work well for your business. The second tip is to think about how to judiciously use your resources. So everybody has a limited set of resources that you can dedicate to something like communications. And Kylie and I were visiting earlier. It can be a real drain on your time if you don't manage how much time you do spend in the platform and on communications in general. So when you're doing that planning process that I mentioned earlier, it's helpful to think about 3 resources and how much you're willing to dedicate in those resources to your communications efforts. First, think about your time. How much time can you invest? How much time can your team members invest? You want to be realistic in the amount of time that you can spend, because that'll help you to create a more realistic plan. You don't want to shoot for the moon and then not have the resources and time to put behind it to help you to reach the goals that you've set. Another important resource to consider is funding. So in some cases, you may want to put some paid support behind some of your posts, or you may need to hire some external help. Maybe you want to hire a consultant or an ad agency to help you with some branding. Being aware of how much you want to dedicate can help during that planning process to create a more realistic plan. And then also it's helpful just to think about your level of expertise. You know, where do you feel most comfortable? You may not feel comfortable on every social media channel, and that's okay. You can realize what your weaknesses are and then invest in that if you're interested in learning a particular platform, or you may decide to not invest in a platform because you just don't feel comfortable and you don't have the time to get comfortable in that platform. So just laying out those resources and being aware of those in the planning process can be really helpful. The third tip is to keep mobile in mind. What I mean by that is that 97% of social media users say that they access content on a mobile device. So you want to make sure when you're developing content that that content looks good on mobile. So check that your images are scaling well on mobile. Check that your text isn't overwhelming. No one wants to read a lot of text on any device, but particularly on a mobile device. So if you do have to include a lot of text, you can use tactics like breaking up large text blocks into smaller paragraphs. You can add emojis to help block up text and so forth. Making posts visual can be really helpful. Use video, use photos. I often think that a visual is most effective in just stopping the scroll. I don't know if any of you use social media, you've probably found yourself at one point just kind of mindlessly scrolling through. I do this often. And an effective visual can really capture your attention and trigger you to want to look at what's happening on that particular post. Creating engagement opportunities refers to that two-way communication that I mentioned earlier. So if you want to collect information, ask people to comment on a post, or pose a poll question and ask people to respond to that poll question. If you do want to create engagement, be sure to include a very clear call to action where you're telling your audience what you want them to do. That may capture their attention and actually get them to do the action that you want them to do. And the sixth tip is to not stop at organic posts. So organic posts are those that you can put online for free. Like anyone can create a Facebook page and anyone can post on that page and it'll be free, but free only goes so far anymore because these environments are so cluttered. Ignite Social Media is a firm that's done some work in this area, and it found that of a typical Facebook page, only about 2.2% of a page's followers are seeing a post that goes on the platform. And on Instagram, it's only about 9%. So when you post something, you're only reaching really a sliver of your audience if you don't put any paid support behind it. Depending upon the channel, paid support can be expensive. It can be less expensive on a platform like Facebook. It's definitely more expensive on a platform like LinkedIn. But look into what your options are for paid support so you can at least ensure that you're reaching the people who are following your page. With paid support, you can also expand your audience and reach people who are in your target audience but don't already follow your page. That's the beauty of paid support on social media. The seventh tip is to exercise creativity. What I mean by this is think about what differentiates you or your business, and then share that point of differentiation. So can you share information that someone can't get anywhere else, or do you have a perspective that no one else will have? Tap into that, because that gives people a reason to want to follow you and hear your perspective on social media. The eighth tip is to don't just talk, listen. What I mean by this is that no one wants to be sold to constantly, particularly on social media. So try to strike an 80-20 balance to where about 80% of the time you're sharing value-added type information, where you're entertaining, you're informing, or so forth. Only spend about 20% of the time on content that's overtly promotional, to where you're trying to sell something. Choose branding mandatories is the ninth tip. What I mean by that are choose brand elements like colors, fonts, logos, writing style, tone of voice, and then use that consistently regardless of the channels that you're using. I'm going to give you an example here of the power of branding mandatories. If you take a look at this logo up on the screen, what do you think of? Yeah, you think Google, but what does it say? Yeah, it says Facebook. So why did you think Google instead of Facebook? Yeah, the colors and the font choice. So this shows you that with branding mandatories, if you use brand elements consistently, it's like your audience knows who's doing the talking before they even consumed a message that you have available to share. So another example here, we see this blue background, the white text, that particular font choice. We're probably not thinking Google though, we're probably thinking Facebook. So anytime you can choose a set of brand elements that you use consistently, that's going to benefit your social media presence and all communication efforts that you have invested in. My 10th tip is to make content easy to consume. This is important because we are inundated with information every day. I saw a quote in Adweek that said something like, we receive 4,000 to 10,000 advertisements every day. So if you're on social media, you have to compete with all of those other messages. And so make your content easy to consume so it's, your audience is willing to process the message that you're trying to share. Some tips for doing that: always add visuals, so that can be video or photos. Break up heavy text. Always try to write as concisely as possible. Use simple sentences, short paragraphs. If you can, try to use some formatting on your text. That's difficult to do on social media. When I say formatting, I mean like boldface, italicizing text, and so forth. But just look for all the ways you can to make that message as easy to consume, because then your audience is going to be more likely to process that message. The 11th tip is one that I use every day. I create a content calendar and then follow it religiously. Here's an example of what a content calendar looks like. Basically, for each social media platform where I have a responsibility to manage, I have an Excel spreadsheet that looks something like this. And in that spreadsheet, I include the date we're going to put something online, the idea that we have, or if I've written out the post, I include the draft here in the message column. I include a media column so I know what kind of photo or video we're supposed to be adding to each post. Any notes go in their own column. And if you really want to tie back this content calendar to the plan that I mentioned earlier, it is helpful to include a column for the goal and strategy that each message aligns with. This keeps you honest with yourself that every message that you are presenting does actually go back to those goals and strategies that you outlined in your plan. So it is helpful just to kind of double check yourself that you aren't getting off course and you are staying with the plan that you outlined at the outset. And then my last tip is to always think about measurement. It helps when you have a goal that is timed and that is quantifiable. That makes tracking your performance a lot easier. But go back about every month or every quarter, whenever you have time, but kind of schedule it so you actually do go and make the time to do this activity. See how well you're performing on your goal. If your goal is to increase sales, after 3 months, are you increasing your sales? If you're not increasing sales to the extent that you'd like, then you may want to make some adjustments to your plan so you can get closer to reaching those goals that you set. Or you may need to realize that maybe you set a goal that was a little too ambitious and you need to dial that back a little bit. But that measurement process and going back and checking in with how well you're performing on your goals can be really helpful. So I do have a few other resources to direct you to if you're interested. We have an extension guide sheet called Harnessing Social Media to Build Your Business. We updated that last year. It's available at the short link up on the screen. I'd encourage you to go take a look at that. And then we also had a MASBDA-funded project last year where we did some video lessons on Facebook and Instagram marketing. And all of those video lessons are available at this Biddy link. And then also at that Biddy link, we do have some resources about how to create a communications plan. It kind of takes you through step by step if you're interested in more details. So that wraps up my comments, and I think I'll pass it off to our next speaker, Andrew.
All right, as Mr. Lout said, my name is Andrew Howerton, and I serve as the production manager for Reliance Pork. And what I'm going to talk to you about today, I'm going to basically just share I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to share our strategy that we use as a producer. How many do we have that are producer-based here? Right here, okay, probably 60, 70%. So what I'm going to talk about is going to be mainly for those who are producers, go over our quick strategy, and then I'm going to show you a couple examples of what we use on our social media. We pretty much use Facebook. Let me get this in here real quick. So before I do that, though, a little bit of background on me. I grew up on the farm, 7th generation in what we're doing there. But when I graduated college, I went into sales and sales management and spent several years in that realm. And also tried to start a few different businesses. And within that, and I also just have a natural, I just like social media. Spent some time studying and trying to use social media for different business platforms. So at the time, I was kind of using it to try to sell. And right now, I'm not using it so much to sell in the same sense, but I am trying to persuade, and I'll go into that in a minute. But anyway, that's kind of how I got into using social media and why I wanted to use it whenever I got back into production, came back to the farm in 2017, and been doing that ever since. So strategy-wise, Alice hit on a lot of good things there, some of which I'm going to piggyback on there. But if you would, Ned, hit the, or sorry, that's me right there. I can take care of that. From a strategy standpoint, I think most of us have probably heard it said at one point, if you appeal to everybody, you appeal to nobody. So the big thing that I would hit on as far as strategy, be selective. Don't be afraid to dive in and be selective at who you want to hit on this kind of thing with your posts. For us, we use Facebook almost exclusively. And to know who you're going to appeal to, you have to, as Alice said, know your end goal or know your why in essence. So for us as a producer, the big thing we're always trying to get is for us either get more employees or make sure that our current employees are engaged. That's kind of a morale booster. I see some nods kind of going around there. So from a sales standpoint, we're not trying to use it to sell more of our product. We are trying to use it to get more product out by making sure we have enough employees to take care of that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And basically the strategy I use for employee engagement, current employee engagement through our posts is also, if I do it right, is going to appeal to those that we're trying to recruit or those that we want to come on board. And again, you want to be selective there. So how do you know what to do there? For us, it starts with our mission statement. For us, our mission statement is we want to honor God by doing an ordinary job in an extraordinary way. And then our core values are going to flow out of that. So if we've got our core values down, and we stand for things like integrity, and we're all for hard work but having a good time while we're doing it. You guys can go down the list, and you may not have made a list yet. It's actually a pretty good practice to make those lists of what you stand for. But once you do that, you know that that's the type of person you want, and that's who I'm going to try to appeal to with what I'm posting. So hopefully your current employees are model your core values, and who you're going after are going to model your core values. And if you post accordingly, you're going to reach those people. And that's why I say appeal. Don't appeal to everybody, because I don't know about you guys, but I've thrown broad blankets before on as you're trying to recruit, and it doesn't really work very well. And the more narrow you can get with your posting, that being something that aligns with your values, you're going to attract those people that are going to, it may be a slower process, but it's going to attract the people that you actually want, has been my experience there. So align your post to your core values. Determine your audience. For us, it's our current employees. They're proud of what they do, or we want them to be proud of what they do, so we're going to post things about what's going on in the barn. And and we have different shifts. We're a 5,600 sow unit. I'm sure everybody's at different sizes, but we've got different shifts, and not everybody gets to see what's going on at the different times of the day. And even if everybody's on the same shift, you don't get to see what's going on in the gestation barn versus the farrowing if you're on one side or the other. So it gives everybody kind of something to rally around as far as your current employees at the end of the day. And the last bit on the strategy there I have listed there is take your time from the standpoint of know that you can't take back whatever you put out there. So don't drag your feet and take forever, but even though you can delete it, if someone's seen it and you didn't want it to be seen in hindsight, that's a problem. So take your time, make sure you get the right thing out there. So yeah, focus on your audience, know your mission, your core values, and let your posts start flowing from there. And I think everyone could agree here that one of the problems we have in our industry is it's hard for people to see what we're doing. Back in the day, people could see what hog farmers were doing. People don't really get to see that these days, and I think it's a problem. I think we've all heard this conversation before, but we're kind of concerned about people not being able to see what's going on there. And if we keep, not that we're intentionally hiding it, but with the biosecurity and all this stuff, it's really hard for people to get an idea of what's going on there. So I think we have concerns about the next generation. So this is an opportunity for all of us to, as long as we do it right, get the doors open on the barn a little bit and let outsiders see what it is. And if you got somebody who's considering coming on board with you, they get to see the inside before they say yes. And sometimes that's important, because we all have those 1 day or 2 dayers that come in and leave. So anyway, with that, I'll show you a couple examples of some things that we've done, and different, even if you have your core values or whatever, you can have a big mix of kind of genres of posts. You have some funny ones, you have something that's more informative, and something that's more employee appreciation based, and so on. So I'll show you a couple kind of ways that we go about it. I'm not saying it's the right way to go about it, but it's something that seems to work for us within reason. And post with some frequency. It doesn't have to be every day, but keep it fresh. Whenever people are considering coming on board with you, they want to see that you have some energy to your organization. They want to know that that's an attractive thing. So make sure you're posting with some frequency. Also, Facebook tends to kind of hurt you a little bit if you don't post frequently enough, so you want to make sure that you're staying active on that front there. And before jumping into the examples, Alice said something about branding. Some of us may say, well, I don't have a brand, right? I don't know. And know that if you don't have a brand, that kind of is your brand at the end of the day. We pretty much all have a brand. So I think it is important to have something out there and take control of what your brand is, because if you don't have something, that's pretty much going to be what your brand is you don't have something that's organized out there. So anyway, with that, we'll show a couple of examples. I got probably, 8 pictures or so of different things that we put out there. Just to, again, we're trying to appeal to our current employees and get them laughing about something, or those who might come on board. So some barn humor. With the presentation I put together, you can't see all the can't see all the captions up top there, but we use a lot of emojis with what's going on out there, trying to humanize the brand, humanize who we are, not let it come across as stale. So I think the caption here says something like, if you ever had to catch one of these, you know why this stance is required. And having to grab a pig in the hallway there. We're not trying to appeal to huge masses. We're trying to appeal to our area here. This is probably our biggest. I was kind of surprised by it that it was a big hit, but this one got up to Iowa or something, and people just started sharing it all over the place, which kind of surprised me. But if you've ever had to catch a pig like that, you know exactly why that stance is required, and people just found a lot of humor in that. So our own current employees and then people in the industry were just thought that was funny and started sharing it. So we try to keep some things comical. And we'll grab memes that are going on currently in the industry and snag a hold of those and try to attach it to what's going on with what we're doing. So first one is starting to move sows. You're kind of like, go. And then at the bottom, you're like, let's go. So people just really gravitate towards that thing because it's the things that we do every day in the barn there that appeal to people there. Well, if we got something unique going on in the barn, like I've got my phone on me at all times. If I see something that is outside the norm and we got some beautiful pigs or something like that, I'm going to snag some pictures of that and make sure that we get that stuff up there. And that's, again, kind of a rallying point for our people there. All right. Employee appreciation type posts. So this is like our night crew, for instance. So we'll just say, hey, we're really thankful for our night crew. They do a great job cleaning up the day and yada, yada, yada. Post that, get that out there. And those people feel really appreciated. And then if people are looking at coming on board with the organization, they know that you appreciate your employees, and it means something to them. More employee appreciation. Hey, this is the Farron crew. We're thankful for what they do every day. And my point in showing you this is like, just get resourceful would be my encouragement. Get resourceful on just things that happen every day. Find those things to take pictures of and share. It's just simply the cars in the parking lot, but man, hey, we're thankful for all the people who show up every day and help us make this go round, make this operation go round. And got the sunset there, something that happens every day. Might as well take a picture of the beauty that God's put out there and share it with people. Sentimental posts. If you got some kiddos or whatever that come in every now and again, don't be afraid to get them in the mix there if you want to. I think this one says, the bosses came in today. Thankfully, they were all smiles. Just putting something out like that. Those are my two little boys, by the way, my two oldest. Put something historical out there. Whether your history is a few years or a few hundred years, get something out there. There's different people who appeal to different things out there. So this is some of our old finishing floors way back in the day, and people different age groups tend to like these different segments a little differently there. So we put out I shouldn't say a lot, but we put out a decent amount of historical posts there, and people tend to appreciate that. Especially if some people value that. Some people are thinking about coming on board. They want a place that's had some substantial time to it and been around a while. Spiritual, we're not afraid of our faith and getting it out there and sharing it. So if we see something out there and that's going on out there, we're not afraid to talk about it and share like a hymn or something. So if we got white snow and you can be washed white as snow, we're going to get that out there and share that with people. And people who appreciate that are going to come on board to our organization. That's not going to be for everybody, but it's going to be for the type of folks that we're after. So, at any rate, those are just some of the examples of what we do as a producer. We probably average, I don't know how many people we have like our page. It's well under 1,000, but we probably average, I don't know, somewhere between 15 to 20 likes on a well thought out post. We probably average 2 or 3 shares. Nothing crazy, but it's enough to get it out in our local area, and again, keep the page exciting and engaging there. So, wrapping up there. Long story short, know what you stand for. If you don't know that, figure that out, and then And don't wait necessarily to start that, but like don't necessarily feel like you have to have it all figured out before you get going. But that's really helpful and helps you know what you can post, what you shouldn't post, and know what that end goal is and go from there. So anyway, that's what I got. Appreciate your all's attention, and if you have questions at the end, feel free to reach out to me. Here. Oh yeah, you go. All right. Got one. Okay.
I do. I'm good. Hello. I'm so happy to see all of you here today. I actually wish there was more people here because I am a firm believer that social media is not going away anytime soon. And I think as an industry, we need to be louder and prouder of what we do every single day. So my name is Kylie Epperson. There's no PowerPoint or anything. It is just me standing up here talking, so bear with me here. I am an owner of Legacy Pork, and also my family raises hogs at Epperson Farms Incorporated. We have a handful of businesses. We have about 7,000 sows, farrow to wean at this point. We just kind of finished getting out of the finisher barns. But I kind of want to talk about where I started and how I have grown a social media presence, and then just some high-hitting tips of things to do, how to do them, and just basically tell you what I do and what's really worked for me. So my main social media presence is on Instagram. It is my all-time favorite. I also have a Facebook page like Andrew, our farm, does. But when I started sharing on social media, I was one of those typical college students who had like 1,000 followers, and my friends, people I met at like parties, and we were in like study groups together. But as I went back to my family farm and married my husband, I realized that there was a missing piece of the puzzle of people my age in their mid-20s. I'm now 30, so I was in my mid-20s then, sharing about agriculture, especially in the hog industry. And so we started, Jordan, my husband and I kind of started thinking out loud, and I would say out of our family operation, my in-laws, who are sitting over here in the front, and my husband and I, we all decided that I was probably that person to do computer-type social media stuff. And so together in 2014, we built a sow unit, a 5,600 head sow unit that we were incredibly proud of. It ran for a few years and had some illness issues and had some management issues. And unfortunately, in 2018, we had a very tragic barn fire. And it eliminated everything on the site. And it was a very, very hard time for our family. And now it's just part of our story. But at the time, it was so much more than money to us. And I felt like from the outside looking in, people thought they lost their barns, all they care about is money. And I think a lot of times outside of our industry, that's what people think. There's not as much, you can't see, like Andrew said, into barns. And so there's less of a emotional connection between people, the care, what we're doing, and then the outside aspect of just raising animals for profit. And so when we lost our barns, we did have a huge financial impact of that. But one of the more important things that happened to us, and one of the harder things that happened to us, and I'll never forget, was bringing every single employee into our hall right after then and saying, you guys don't have somewhere to work on Monday. The people that we were supporting their livelihoods. And so at that moment, I tell you all of that because I then at that point wanted to share more about what we do and why we do it. It's not just about the money. We build relationships, we build teams, we care for these animals. So going from just that small college Instagram following of about 1,000 followers to now I have about 30,000 followers on Instagram that I share often, both my personal brand and then also our farm brand. And Alice had mentioned you can do both. You can brand personally or you can brand as a farm, and I'm fortunate enough to absolutely love our farm and our farm name that I consider my personal brand and our farm brand one and the same. So what I'm doing is I'm attracting middle-aged women. All of you in here would be immediate follows for me, and I'm talking to you in a way that you guys are the ones that are going to the grocery store and buying food, okay? I want to make you feel confident on my social media that you trust me as a producer and my family, that you are confident to go to the grocery store and buy pork chops and not let those words in the back of your head that you see on ads like grass-fed or non-GMO or organic and all of those things that we hear in the background influence you and understand that we are raising an incredibly safe product that we really, really genuinely care about. So if I can create an emotional connection with you, again, I'm not going on my social media and saying, hogs are amazing, it's the easiest job I've ever done, I don't stress out ever, it's just so great, there's never any illness, there's never any problems. I'm not doing that. I'm not forcing facts down their throats, I'm throwing them in. So Alice also had said, and Andrew, about your intention. And so on my social media, I have pillars. And one of my pillars is my family. One of my pillars is our farm, our grain operation. And another pillar would be the hogs. I've got some other things going on. But when I'm creating social media posts, I'm always thinking about my pillars. I'm always thinking about who I want to target and who I want to really hear what I'm saying, because I could post and people could see it, but if they're not really listening, it doesn't really matter. And I'm one of those ones who spends too much time thinking about what I'm going to put out there. And so Instagram, in all social media, but Instagram is continually changing, and so now it's even more of a video platform than it was 2 years ago when I started. And so that's kind of bringing new challenges as it comes, but we want to evict emotion. I talk a lot about our family and my struggles as a mom of 3 very small children, or my wins, or bringing the kids to the farm. And so I'm making that connection because I know that there are hundreds and thousands of other farm wives that are just like me, that maybe are lonely, or maybe they, and I know you guys maybe are not all farm wives, or you may not relate with this, but that's what I'm doing. That's how I'm making that connection. Or I'm connecting with young women coming out of college that want to also be an advocate. And I'm building that relationship outside of agriculture, and then I'm filtering back in my passion for agriculture as we go. So there's a way to do it without just being completely farm focused. Andrew's focus was employees, future employees. My focus is middle-aged individuals who are going to the grocery store who want to feel confident about what they're buying. I'm trying to look at the longevity of our industry as a whole, because we don't do a direct-to-consumer market at our farm. Let's see what other points I have written down here. When I post pork content, pig content, I do often find myself getting a lot of very, very, very nasty, mean comments from activists. And there's a lot of ways to combat that. Like I just got one the other day that asked how involved I was in slaughtering the animals and how old I was when my mom and dad decided to have me slaughtered. Obviously, that's just super special and makes you feel good inside. But I don't want to let that scare you, because those people are just people behind a computer. Okay? I always either don't respond, or when I do respond, I respond with a lot of kindness. I always kill it with kindness and say, like, I understand that you have your views. God bless. Have a great day. Because integrity is really important to me and our family and my last name. And so I always combat that. And if there's a conversation that's to be had, you're going to know. You're going to know if it could be a conversation or if it's instantly a fight. And if it's always going to be a fight, if they're going to be hateful like that, then there's really just no use in putting time or wasting time and going back and forth with them. I just have a couple more points. One other thing that so again, I talked about personal brand versus farm brand. Mine started out as farm brand. It used to be the Grateful Farm Wife. And since I really dove into kind of being a personal brand, but I still love my farm so much and identify so closely with it, it is still a huge pillar. But why are we sharing? Has anybody seen the New York Times video that just released maybe a week ago? It's not good. I don't encourage you to go watch it, but if you do, it is a New York Times, they published it. It's a woman who is slandering and saying the worst things about animal agriculture. And it's getting a lot of traction. And so when we say, why are we sharing? If we're not getting employees, or we don't have an intentional audience, and we're not standing up for what we believe in, we're letting a big population, because remember, farmers are 2% of the population. 2. I don't have any idea. I wish I'd been more prepared and told you how many people live in the world, but in the United States, but I'm not. 2% is teeny tiny. And so often it feels like we're talking to each other, but there's some part of our social media following. One of the best ways to reach people that aren't in your community is social media. And so if we're not telling our story, if we are not standing up for ourselves, at least sharing the good that we're doing, if we're not doing that, then people who don't know, and we cannot fault them for that. And they're hearing New York Times, and New York Times, for whatever reason, has a lot of clout. People may believe them over believing someone who's a farmer. So my whole goal with my social media is to build trust so that when I say something about farming or the pork industry, there's trust. They trust me. They trust my husband. They trust my in-laws. They trust other pork farmers because we're doing the right thing. We're doing the best that we can with what we have. So if you have someone on your farm, maybe you don't want to be that person for your farm, but if there's someone on your farm that you can trust and that can put a good foot forward sharing what we do and why we do it, I highly, highly encourage you taking that step, because the 2% of us, there's probably only 2% of that 2% sharing. And so we're doing a hard job knocking against the New York Times articles or activists or Going Green. So we have to support each other in that way. And that's the end of my TED Talk. Thank you, guys. I wonder if we have questions. Dawn, you got anything?
So, how do you get started? Like, what's the first thing that I should be doing?
You want to go? That was a good question.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. My first recommendation would be to identify a target audience that you want to reach, and then identify what it is you want to do on in any communication effort, including social media. So really think through about, if you want it to focus on a personal branding approach, a farm branding approach, like knowing those three questions, answers to those three questions, I think will be a good place to start. You could always reach out and visit with others to kind of see what's worked for them. I mean, we had two great perspectives here today about what's worked for their farms, but just collecting more intel about what's worked for others, that can also give you some motivation about where to make investments. Does that help?
Yeah.
Excellent. Any other questions?
What I would recommend too is picking one platform, because it can get very overwhelming to be trying to do Facebook, YouTube, Instagram all at once. Like, pick one and start there, and then when you get really comfortable sharing there, then maybe they do have a lot of apps that can share to Instagram and Facebook at the same time. So if that's how you want to do it, but I just wouldn't get too overwhelmed trying to create separate content for both, because it is overwhelming.
Any other questions?
So we're with Missouri Farmers Care. I'm Ashley Cardi with Missouri Farmers Care. We are looking to feature, so it's daunting to start your own brand. Kylie's got a brand that's well developed. So our tagline, we spend lots of money supported by our agriculture group, saying join the conversation at Missouri Farmers Care, but lack some of that space. And so we've reinvested in launching a profile in just farmers in the state. We just want to show that common thread of value connection that connects us with our customers in many different ways. That can be FFA members, farmers, agribusinesses. It's really easy for us to be able to highlight you. So you may not have a brand developed, but we can say, look, here I am on a snowy day out here taking care of my animals. Or I made I bought this pork butt at the grocery store today and feel really happy with what I'm going to do with my family today. And so anybody who's interested, please reach out to Missouri Farmers Care. You can find us everywhere. Taylor will be featuring you in a way that can share with the 30,000 people who are half consumers and half agriculture, because they really just want to see us and connect with us, and they're there trying to be supportive. We are happy to help raise the tide for all of us and leverage that in any way we can.
Absolutely.
Yes.
How active do you need to be on your social media? Something daily or is it weekly? What do you need to do?
I think it varies a little bit. I wouldn't be stale with it, and when I say stale, I would try to do no less than once a week, and ideally probably 2-3 posts a week would be ideal, at least on Facebook, to keep, there's a little bit of mystery around the algorithm and how they put forward what they put forward, but everything that I've kind of read and looked at says be good to post 2-3 times a week probably, and keep that thing pretty fresh there. So that'd be my my tip, but don't know what you guys think there.
I would say if you're in the growth phase and your intent is to grow your page to talk to more people, it needs to be rather frequently, especially for Instagram. It needs to be every day, and you need to be showing up in stories with your face, not just sharing posts of like your animals, or you need to be turning the camera to yourself. And I promise it gets easier with time, and just a quick like, oh, I'm out here, whatever you do, okay? Because I'm super transparent in saying with my followers, like, I am not in the barns every day. I don't lie about that. That's not my thing. But that doesn't make me less passionate about what I do. So my day-to-day stories are going to be different than other farmers, but definitely show up in your stories. And if your intent is growth, as often as you feel comfortable is what I really want to say. But the more often, the better.
I'll just add to that it really does vary by platform. Like Andrew was suggesting, if you're going to be on Facebook once a week, probably at the minimum, I like the 2 to 3 times a week that he suggested. Instagram, yes, you need to post more frequently. Same thing with Twitter, you need to post more frequently. I mean, even a couple times a day when you're first getting started is probably a good strategy, just because the life of a tweet is so short. If you're using like LinkedIn for more professional purposes, you can get by with once a week, once every other week on a platform like that and still be relevant in news feeds.